Yesterday, the Supreme Court handed Donald Trump his most embarrassing single-day defeat of his second term, and simultaneously handed him more structural power over the U.S. government than any president has held since the New Deal. The man who has spent 4 years insisting that Russia feels no pain from the war in Ukraine stood in front of Russian state television and admitted that Ukrainian drones have created a domestic fuel shortage, while his citizens fought each other at gas station lines across the country. And Taylor Swift is getting married tomorrow at Madison Square Garden, with NDAs for all 1,000 guests, NYPD street closures, and the entire event landing somehow on the eve of America's 250th birthday. Let's get into all three. Start with the Supreme Court, because the way yesterday's decisions are being reported as a Trump defeat on birthright citizenship is accurate as far as it goes and doesn't go nearly far enough. The court ruled 6-3 that the Constitution guarantees automatic birthright citizenship to virtually everyone born in the United States. Rejecting the executive order Trump signed on his first day back in office, seeking to deny citizenship to children born here to parents without permanent legal status. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion. The ruling follows a 128-year-old precedent set in Wong Kim Ark versus United States in 1898, which itself confirmed that the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, means exactly what it says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. Roberts found no reason to depart from that precedent, and every lower court that had reviewed Trump's executive order had already called it, in one judge's words, blatantly unconstitutional. An estimated 255,000 children born every year to non-citizen parents would have lost legal citizenship under the order. According to a 2025 joint analysis by the Migration Policy Institute and Penn State, increased the unauthorized immigrant population by an additional 2.7 million people by 2045, not decrease it, because those children would have no legal status in any country, creating a self-perpetuating class of stateless people. Trump was not gracious in defeat. He posted on Truth Social that no long and unwieldy constitutional amendment is necessary, and urged Congress to start today to work on ending expensive and unfair to our country birthright citizenship. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he was disappointed and raised the possibility of a constitutional amendment, which would require a 2/3 supermajority in both chambers and ratification from 3/4 of the states. That is not a realistic near-term path. The headline version of yesterday is, Trump tried to end birthright citizenship. The court that he partially built told him no. Now here's the more important version. The same day the court handed Trump that defeat, it handed him 3 other decisions, and one of them is, structurally, far more significant than the birthright ruling will ever be. In a separate 6-3 decision issued the day before the birthright ruling, also authored by the court's conservative bloc, the justices struck down Humphrey's Executor, a 1935 Supreme Court precedent that had, for 91 years, protected members of independent federal agencies from being fired by the president without cause. That 91-year protection is now gone. The specific case involved Trump's firing of Federal Trade Commission Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, and the court found that firing was lawful. Independent regulatory commissioners, the majority held, must remain accountable to the president because they exercise executive power. Gorsuch, in a concurring opinion, made the logical extension explicit. The fourth branch's powers still exist. They have just been reassigned to the president. Think carefully about what that means in practice. The independent agency structure, built during the New Deal era specifically to place certain regulatory functions beyond the reach of whoever happened to be in the White House, covered not just the FTC, but the FCC, the SEC's administrative functions, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the CFTC, and most significantly, as a matter of ongoing litigation, the Federal Reserve. The Fed's Lisa Cook was given a temporary 5-4 reprieve, but on procedural grounds, because the administration hadn't given her proper notice before firing her. That procedural deficiency is fixable. The underlying question of whether the president can fire Fed governors for policy disagreement is now, after Humphrey's executor is gone, far more legally exposed than it was 3 days ago. The court that rejected Trump's birthright order has simultaneously handed him a tool to reshape every major regulatory institution in the federal government at will, and replaced a 91-year structural check on executive power with essentially nothing. There's a third ruling on top of these two. The court struck down post-Watergate era limits on how much individuals can give to political parties, a campaign finance law that has governed American elections since 1974. Combined with Citizens United in 2010 and its subsequent expansions, this decision moves American campaign finance law toward a model where the primary limiting constraint on money in politics is simply what donors choose to spend. And then there's the trans athlete ruling. The court upheld 6-3 state laws requiring student athletes to compete based on biological sex at birth at publicly funded schools, affecting policies at schools in roughly 25 states. Supreme Court expert Amy Howe, co-founder of SCOTUS blog, offered the framing that holds all of this together. In the last couple of years, they have been willing to give this president really broad power. That's the through line. The court that rejected Trump's birthright order is the same court that is systematically dismantling the structural architecture that distributed power away from the executive branch for the better part of a century. You can get very angry about the birthright ruling specifically and miss the larger move, which is a court reshaping who, fundamentally, controls the levers of American governance. The president is losing individual immigration battles while winning the structural war over institutional control. Both things are true at once. Now Russia, because what Putin said out loud this week matters more than almost anything he said in 4 years of this conflict. Vladimir Putin, in a government meeting on Saturday and in a state television interview on Sunday, publicly acknowledged that Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian oil refineries are creating domestic fuel shortages. As for strikes against critical infrastructure in general, and energy infrastructure in particular, of course, these attacks on our infrastructure facilities create problems, Putin said. Right now we're observing a certain shortage, but it's not critical. The language is calibrated. Certain shortage, not critical. But the fact that he said it at all is the story. Putin has spent 4 years curating a domestic narrative in which the war in Ukraine exists at a comfortable remove from ordinary Russian life, waged out there with professional soldiers and precision weapons, generating military victories on a map that the average Russian citizen feels mainly as distant pride, not personal cost. The gas station footage circulating on Russian social media this week, 2 women fighting over a place in line in front of a Rosneft pump, a man in Sarov punching a woman at a station before police arrived, long queues in Moscow, Krasnodar, Siberia, does not fit that narrative. Putin chose to acknowledge the problem before the footage made it impossible not to. Ukraine's drone campaign targeting Russian energy infrastructure has been building since last year, but the pace and depth of penetration has accelerated dramatically in 2026. Ukrainian drones struck the Kapotnya oil refinery in Moscow itself. Smoke was visible from the Russian capital, an attack that would have been considered an almost impossible reach at the start of the war. Overnight into Sunday, Ukrainian forces struck 2 more refineries, one in Krasnodar, roughly 186 miles from the front line, and another in Yaroslavl, 435 miles from Ukraine's border. Zelensky described the strikes directly as long-range sanctions, and the framing is strategically useful because it names what the campaign is actually designed to accomplish, not to win a specific battlefield engagement, but to degrade the economic infrastructure that sustains a military Russia cannot afford to stop fighting. Maxim Katz, a Russian opposition figure quoted by Fox News, summarized the strategic calculus plainly. They are bombing the refineries very effectively. Putin doesn't have a way to defend them. Right now, it looks like there is no way to defend them, and that is a major pressure point on Putin. The visible effects are cascading across Russian-controlled territory. Crimea, occupied by Russia since 2014 and regularly targeted by Ukrainian strikes because of its symbolic and logistical importance, has gone into what local authorities described as a fuel emergency. Civilian gas sales have been suspended indefinitely. Emergency restrictions include ending public transportation after 10 p.m., requiring large shops and cafes to close 2 hours early, and turning off street lighting. These are the kinds of visible, daily life intrusions that wartime governments typically dread more than battlefield setbacks, because they convert an abstract conflict into a concrete personal experience for citizens who never voted for the consequences they're now absorbing. Russia's government is also considering temporarily banning diesel exports entirely, a move that would signal how serious the domestic supply problem is, given that diesel export revenues have been one of the war economy's key funding mechanisms. Russia's economy, its central bank has forecast, will grow between 0.5 and 1.5% in 2026, a sharp deceleration from the war-spending-driven growth of 2024 and 2025. The whole economy is now built on war. War does not produce anything. Nothing comes back from it. So what remains is a big hole. The most significant geopolitical dimension of all of this isn't Putin's embarrassing admission, or even the gas station fights. It's what the fuel crisis reveals about the viability of Ukraine's long-term strategy. If Ukraine cannot win the war through tactical battlefield superiority alone, and the evidence after 4 years of grinding attrition is that neither side can, then a strategy of systematically degrading the supply and economic infrastructure that makes Russia's military campaign sustainable becomes the most logical available lever. Drone strikes on refineries hundreds of miles inside Russian territory do something that frontline advances cannot. They make the war felt at home, in line at a gas station, at a price-controlled pump with nothing coming out of it. Whether that domestic economic pressure eventually produces political change inside Russia is unknowable. Whether it's creating real economic strain that constrains Russia's military options, on that, Putin just answered the question himself. Because it genuinely can't be avoided, and honestly shouldn't be, let's talk about tomorrow. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are getting married at Madison Square Garden on July 3rd. According to reporting from NBC News and multiple entertainment outlets, the event will involve roughly 1,000 guests. NYPD street closures around Madison Square Garden and non-disclosure agreements that every confirmed guest has apparently received and signed. The wedding is scheduled to coincide with July 4th weekend celebrations, the same America's 250th birthday festivities that saw the Trump administration's Great American State Fair on the National Mall struggle with power outages, empty state booths, and a Ferris wheel that stopped working on opening day. One of these national July 4th weekend cultural moments is expected to generate considerably more organic public engagement than the other. There is a specific detail in the reporting worth noting even at the level of pure entertainment coverage, the NDAs. For a celebrity couple getting married in what will be, however controlled, a public space with 1,000 guests and NYPD involvement, requiring everyone on the list to sign a non-disclosure agreement, is not a routine wedding planning choice. It's the operating practice of a person who has experienced a documented, years-long surveillance and harassment problem by people specifically trying to monetize unauthorized access to her private moments. The NDAs are not paranoia. They are the rational institutional response of someone who has learned, at considerable personal cost, that the alternative is watching her most private experiences become content for people who profit from distributing it without her consent. That context is worth naming rather than treating the NDAs as evidence of celebrity excess. The cultural timing of this is genuinely unusual. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are getting married the night before America's 250th birthday in New York City at a venue that has functioned as a kind of unofficial national stage for some of American culture's most defining moments. The country's most commercially successful musician and its most famous active football player, tying the knot at MSG the eve before July 4th. The image the administration wanted for the national birthday weekend was a state fair on the National Mall with all 50 states represented. The image the country is actually going to be looking at is something different. I genuinely don't have a strong critique to offer here, and I don't think one is warranted. Two people getting married is a good thing. Full stop. And the fact that these particular two people happen to be extraordinary at what they do doesn't change the basic nature of the event. The 250th birthday of the United States will be marked by an enormous fireworks display, military flyovers, and a CBS primetime special, and also, somehow, by Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce getting married in a building that has hosted Muhammad Ali fights, Frank Sinatra concerts, and the Knicks losing playoff series for 50 years. America has always been several things at once. Tomorrow is no different. 3 stories today, on the first day of July, in the country's 250th year. The Supreme Court that handed Trump his most politically embarrassing defeat in 18 months of a second term also handed him the structural tools to dismantle institutional independence that has checked executive power since 1935, who has spent 4 years insisting the war at his border is a manageable operation producing manageable costs, just told his own state television that Ukrainian drones are causing domestic fuel shortages, that ordinary Russians are fighting each other at gas stations over. And Taylor Swift is getting married tomorrow night in Manhattan, while the country simultaneously celebrates and argues about what it is and what it has become. The thread connecting the first 2 stories is the same one I keep coming back to: the gap between what powerful institutions say their situation is and what the evidence shows it actually is. The court says it's checking executive power while expanding it more than any term in recent memory. The Kremlin says the war is not costly while its citizens fight over diesel. The third story has no thread to connect to. And sometimes that's the point. Sometimes the news cycle includes something that simply is what it is, and asking it to carry an analytical payload does a disservice to the thing itself. It's July now. The year is more than half over. Most of the things that were supposed to be resolved by now, the Iran deal, the Ukraine war, the question of who actually runs America's regulatory agencies, are not resolved. What is happening tomorrow in New York is not complicated. It's just 2 people, a building, a few thousand witnesses, and whatever happens next.